To the outside world, they were the picture of the American dream. A devoted husband, a loving wife, two beautiful daughters, and another baby on the way. They smiled in family photos, posted videos of bedtime stories and birthday parties, and projected happiness to everyone who knew them. But behind the doors of a quiet suburban home in Frederick, Colorado, dark secrets were waiting to erupt. Secrets that would end in betrayal, murder, and one of the most haunting true crime stories of the modern era. The Watts family lived in a two-story home on Saratoga Trail in Frederick, Colorado, a small, quiet town just 25 miles north of Denver. It was the kind of neighborhood where children rode bicycles in cul-de-sacs, lawns were neatly trimmed, and neighbors waved to each other on their way to work. Shanann Catherine Watts was 34 years old, a vibrant woman full of energy and ambition. She worked as a brand promoter for a health company, often sharing her success stories on Facebook Live. She was bubbly, driven, and devoted to her children. Chris Watts, her husband, worked for Anadarko Petroleum as an oil field operator. Reserved and soft-spoken, he seemed like the quiet type who adored his family. Together, they had two daughters, Bella, age 4, a shy but sweet little girl, and Celeste, nicknamed Cece, age 3, full of mischief and joy. And in 2018, Shanann was pregnant with their third child, a boy they planned to name Nico. To anyone who glanced at their social media, the Watts family looked flawless. Shanann posted videos of Chris surprising her with gifts, the girls giggling in the back seat, family trips, and tender moments that painted the image of a perfect marriage. Shanann often told the story of how she almost didn't date Chris. She was going through health struggles when they first met, but Chris stuck by her. She once wrote online, "He knew me in my worst and still loved me." Their love seemed to grow stronger with the birth of Bella and Celeste. They were the family next door, always smiling, always together. But under the surface, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. Shanann was struggling financially, working hard to keep their family afloat. Chris was becoming distant, losing weight, hitting the gym, and changing in ways Shanann didn't fully understand. The warning signs were there, but hidden beneath the surface. Shanann was trying to hold her family together, while Chris was slowly slipping away. And by the summer of 2018, the cracks in the Watts' picture-perfect life were about to shatter in the most horrific way imaginable. In early August 2018, Shanann traveled to Arizona for a business trip. She texted her friends about how distant Chris had become. She worried he was no longer in love with her. But she clung to hope. She was pregnant, excited about their new baby, and determined to keep her family together. On August 13th, 2018, Shanann returned home from that trip, stepping into her house for the last time. Monday, August 13th, 2018. Frederick, Colorado. A young mother, 15 weeks pregnant, fails to show up for a doctor's appointment. She doesn't answer her phone, she doesn't reply to texts, and her car sits untouched in the garage. For Shanann's friends, alarm bells begin to ring almost immediately. Within hours, the picture-perfect family that everyone thought they knew will unravel into a mystery of lies, betrayal, and unthinkable violence. That morning, Shanann had a scheduled OB/GYN appointment. She was thrilled about her pregnancy and often shared updates with her close friends and family. For her to miss such an appointment was unthinkable. Her best friend, Nicole Atkinson, had dropped her off at home after their late-night business trip. When Shanann stopped responding to calls and texts the next day, Nicole grew worried. By noon, her anxiety turned to dread. Nicole drove to the Watts home on Saratoga Trail. The scene was unsettling. Shanann's car was still in the garage, her purse inside. Her shoes, the pair she wore every day, were by the front door. But there was no sign of Shanann or the girls. Nicole called Chris. His responses were strangely detached. He claimed Shanann was at a friend's house, but he didn't seem concerned. For Nicole, something wasn't right. Moments later, she dialed 911. Frederick police responded quickly. Officer Scott Coonrod was the first to arrive. His body cam footage, later released, became chilling evidence of how Chris Watts behaved in those early hours. When Chris pulled up to the house, he greeted the officer calmly. Too calmly. While Shanann's friends were frantic, Chris seemed strangely detached, almost rehearsed in his answers. Inside the house, nothing looked disturbed. Shanann's wedding ring lay on the nightstand. Her phone was on the couch. It looked like she had vanished into thin air. Missing purse, missing phone, missing car. A pregnant woman and 2 young girls gone without a trace. And standing in the middle of it all was Chris Watts, oddly calm, oddly quiet, and already hiding secrets that would soon come to light. The investigation quickly turned to the Watts neighbors. One man had a surveillance camera pointed at his driveway. When the police asked to see it, Chris became visibly nervous. The footage showed Chris backing his truck into the garage early that morning, something neighbors said he had never done before. Chris explained it away, claiming he was loading tools for work. But his body language told a different story. He fidgeted, crossed his arms, and avoided eye contact. The officer noted how uncomfortable Chris looked. After Chris left, the neighbor whispered to the officer, "He's not acting right. He's never fidgety like this. Something's off." By that evening, the story made local news. Chris Watts stood in front of cameras, pleading for his wife and daughter's safe return. But his performance was chilling. "Shanann, bella, Celeste. If you're out there, just come back. The house isn't the same without you." To the public, it looked strange. His eyes were blank, his words rehearsed, his emotions absent. The interviews that were meant to inspire sympathy only raised suspicion. Behind the walls of the Watts family home, something sinister had already happened. But Chris Watts thought he could talk his way out of it. What he didn't know was that detectives were already watching him closely. When families vanish, the first person investigators look at is the spouse. But Chris Watts didn't just become a person of interest. He became a spectacle. His words, his mannerisms, even the way he stood during TV interviews revealed a disturbing truth. Something was very wrong. And while Chris thought he was convincing the world of his innocence, the cracks in his facade were already beginning to show. In the days after Shanann and the girls went missing, Chris appeared on local television, begging for their safe return. But instead of coming across as a desperate father, his demeanor was off. He spoke in a flat tone. His eyes rarely showed emotion. He folded his arms tightly, as if protecting himself. At one point, he looked directly into the camera and said, "If you're out there, just come back. If somebody has them, just bring them back. This house is not complete without anybody here." The words sounded hollow. Observers noticed he never used their names. He never cried. He never broke. Experts and everyday viewers alike picked up on the strange signals. His arms crossed tightly across his chest, a defensive posture. His constant swaying. The way he touched his face and licked his lips. Body language analysts later said Chris's behavior screamed anxiety and deception. Even the public could sense it. Viewers flooded comment sections and forums, writing things like, "He doesn't seem worried. He seems rehearsed." Chris told police he had last seen Shanann at 5 a.m. He claimed they had a civil conversation about separating, then he left for work. But neighbors and friends contradicted him. Shanann would never just leave without her car, phone, or children's medicine. And that surveillance video of him backing his truck into the garage, it made no sense. The loving husband story he was trying to project was unraveling. Chris was wanted to appear calm, logical, even helpful. But his carefully constructed mask was starting to slip. Every word, every movement, every lie. Detectives were watching closely, and the world was beginning to see through the cracks. Behind the scenes, detectives were already closing in. They searched the Watts home, noting how spotless it looked. Too spotless. The sheets were missing from a bed. The children's rooms felt eerily untouched. They also examined Chris's phone records and discovered inconsistencies. While his wife was missing, Chris was in constant communication with someone else, Nicole Kessinger, his secret girlfriend. The motive investigators were searching for was beginning to emerge. Back in the neighborhood, suspicion spread. Neighbors described Chris as suddenly restless, pacing, and acting off. The same man who was always quiet, friendly, and mild-mannered now looked like a bundle of nerves. One neighbor told police, "He's never like this. He's not acting right." Chris Watts thought he was outsmarting the police. He thought he could stage the perfect disappearance, convince the world he was a grieving husband, and build a new life in the shadows. But what he didn't know was that investigators were about to corner him in a room where no lie could save him. Every crime has a motive. For Chris Watts, it wasn't money, it wasn't revenge, it wasn't even hatred. It was desire. A desire for freedom, a new life, and another woman. And when detectives uncovered his secret affair, the mask of the grieving husband shattered completely. Her name was Nicole Kessinger. She was a 30-year-old coworker at Anadarko Petroleum. Intelligent, ambitious, and drawn to Chris's quiet demeanor, she believed he was a man trapped in a loveless marriage. Chris told her he was in the middle of a separation. He painted Shanann as controlling, distant, and cold. He made himself out to be the victim, and Nicole believed him. Their romance had begun just weeks earlier, but it quickly became intense. They went on secret dates, spent nights together, and exchanged countless text messages filled with passion. To Nicole, Chris seemed like her future, but in reality, he was building a fantasy, one that didn't include his wife or children. In public, Chris was still the husband and father. At home, Shanann posted videos of him playing with the girls, hugging her, or grinning during family trips. But when Shanann wasn't looking, Chris was texting Nicole. He was Googling vacation spots for couples. He was searching for jewelry online. He even looked up lyrics to romantic love songs. At the same time, Shanann was noticing the change. She told friends Chris was cold and distant. During her Arizona trip, she texted him, "I don't know how you fell out of love with me. You're the only thing I ever wanted in my life." Her words were desperate. His responses? Short, detached, emotionless. Shanann was fighting for a marriage. Chris was preparing to erase it. And with every passing day, the divide between them grew wider, until there was no coming back. Detectives were now convinced Chris's affair was the motive. They pulled phone records. They saw the late-night calls. They traced internet searches like, "when to say I love you" to someone new. Nicole herself became a crucial witness. When she learned Shanann was missing, she grew suspicious. She came forward, giving police everything. Text logs, call history, and details of Chris's lies. Suddenly, the concerned husband narrative collapsed. Chris wasn't grieving. He wasn't searching. He was hiding. Shanann's friends said she adored her daughters. The idea that she would kill them was unthinkable. And there was more. Forensic evidence didn't support his story. There were no signs of Shanann harming the children. No defensive wounds. Nothing but Chris's word. The truth, they believed, was far darker. Chris Watts thought he had given police a story they would believe. But the evidence told a different tale. And soon, the horrific details of what really happened would emerge. Details that would shock not only Colorado, but the entire world. When Chris Watts first confessed, he told detectives that Shanann killed their daughters, and that he killed her in a fit of rage. But the truth was far worse. The story he gave was a lie, a desperate attempt to deflect blame. What investigators uncovered next revealed one of the most chilling and heartbreaking crimes in modern history. On August 16, 2018, Chris led investigators to a remote oil site owned by his employer, Anadarko Petroleum. It was an isolated place, miles from town, quiet except for the hum of machinery. There, he pointed to two massive oil storage tanks and a patch of disturbed ground nearby. Inside that shallow grave lay Shanann Watts and her unborn son, Nico. And inside the oil tanks, barely wide enough for a small opening, were Bella and Celeste. Their tiny bodies had been forced into the crude oil, where Chris left them to rot in the dark. The coroner's reports later revealed the unimaginable. Shanann had been strangled, her neck bruised and fractured. Bella and Celeste had been smothered, Chris's own hands taking their final breaths. Toxicology results suggested the girls may have inhaled crude oil after being placed in the tanks, a haunting detail of their suffering. Even seasoned investigators were shaken. Detective Tammy Lee said later, "It was one of the most disturbing cases I've ever worked in my life. Two little girls, a mother expecting her third child, all of them betrayed by the man they trusted most. The brutality of the crime shocked even hardened detectives, leaving a community and soon the world reeling. The discovery of the bodies destroyed Chris's original story. His claim that Shanann killed the girls was impossible to reconcile with the evidence. Shanann's autopsy showed no signs of violence against the children, and Bella's injuries told a different story. She had fought back. Her mouth had cuts consistent with biting her tongue, a sign she struggled as her father smothered her. Bella's last moments were filled with terror and resistance. Prosecutors later said Chris murdered Shanann first, strangling her in their bedroom after an argument. He then smothered Bella and Celeste in the back of his truck as he drove them to the oil site. Imagine that drive. Two little girls sitting next to their mother's body, asking questions, perhaps crying, while their father planned to kill them. It is one of the most chilling details of the case. The utter betrayal of innocence. At every step, Chris Watts had a choice. And at every step, he chose destruction. He killed his pregnant wife. He killed Bella. He killed Celeste. He drove them to their graves. And then he tried to erase them, burying their bodies as if they were nothing more than secrets to hide. News of the recovery shattered Shanann's family. Her parents, Frank and Sandra Rizusek, described the pain as indescribable. At a vigil outside the Watts home, hundreds of people gathered, holding candles, singing hymns, and releasing balloons in honor of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and baby Nico. The facade of the perfect suburban family was gone. In its place stood a story of unimaginable darkness. By the fall of 2018, the truth about the Watts family murders had shaken not only Colorado, but the entire world. The facade of a happy suburban father had been shattered, and Chris Watts now stood exposed as a cold-blooded killer. But what would happen next inside the courtroom was almost as shocking as the crime itself. Chris Watts was formally charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder, 2 for each child, due to them being under 12, plus 1 for Shanann. 1 count of unlawful termination of pregnancy for baby Nico. 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. The charges carried the possibility of the death penalty. But in Colorado, the death penalty was rarely sought, and Shanann's family made their wishes known. They did not want another death. They wanted life in prison for Chris. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts entered the courtroom wearing an orange prison jumpsuit. His face was blank, his voice monotone. When the judge asked how he would plead, Chris answered, "Guilty." Not once, not twice, but 9 times he uttered the word, 1 for each charge. There was no trial, no lengthy testimony. Chris gave up his chance to fight. Some believed it was the first selfless act he had ever done, sparing Shanann's family from a drawn-out trial. Others believed it was just another way to maintain control of the narrative. For the first time, Chris Watts admitted to what he had done. But the manner of his confession, quiet, cold, and almost emotionless, only deepened the horror. He showed no tears, no remorse. Just a man sealing his own fate with a word, guilty. On November 19, 2018, the courtroom filled with the voices of those who loved Shanann and the children. Frank Rizusek, Shanann's father, stood trembling but determined. His voice cracked as he addressed Chris directly. "You took the lives of my daughter, Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico. I trusted you to take care of them, not kill them." He told her Shanann was controlling, that he wasn't happy, that he wanted freedom. For Nickel, Chris seemed like the perfect partner, attentive, affectionate, and eager to build a new life. They went on dates, traveled together, and exchanged intimate messages. Nickel claimed she had no idea Shanann was pregnant at the time. But for Chris, the fantasy of a new life became intoxicating. On one hand, Chris was the smiling father, posting family photos, reading bedtime stories, and attending birthday parties. On the other, he was sneaking away to spend time with Nickel, deleting text messages, and Googling vacation plans for a future without his wife and children. Investigators later uncovered chilling searches on Chris's phone. When to say I love you. How to prepare for a new life. Can cops trace text messages? And even more disturbing, he had researched the cost of a new apartment for just himself. Chris wasn't just daydreaming. He was planning. To the outside world, Chris Watts was a devoted husband. To Nickel Kessinger, he was a man ready to start over. But in reality, Chris was neither. He was a man leading two lives, and soon, he would choose to erase one of them entirely. Experts later classified Chris Watts as a family annihilator, a type of killer who murders their spouse and children, often to escape responsibility or pursue a new relationship. Criminologists note 4 common categories of family annihilators. Self-righteous, blames their partner for the breakdown of the family. Disappointed, believes their family has let them down or not lived up to expectations. Anomic, views the family as a status symbol and kills when that image collapses. Paranoid, believes they're protecting their family from a perceived threat. Chris's actions most closely aligned with the self-righteous type. He painted Shanann as the villain, controlling, demanding, suffocating, when in reality, she was a devoted mother. By killing her and the children, Chris may have believed he was freeing himself to live the life he wanted with Nickel. In a chilling prison interview conducted in 2019, Chris admitted the truth. He killed Shanann after she confronted him about the affair. Then, shockingly, he admitted Bella and Celeste were still alive when he drove them to the oil site. Chris smothered Cece first while Bella watched. Bella's final words, according to Chris, were, "Daddy, no." He then killed Bella last. The sheer cruelty stunned even seasoned investigators. When asked why he did it, Chris said simply, "I thought it would be easier to be with Nickel if they weren't here." Chris Watts destroyed his family not out of necessity, not in a moment of uncontrollable rage, but out of selfish desire. He killed his daughters, his wife, and his unborn son because they no longer fit into the life he wanted. To this day, criminologists study the Watts case as an example of how quickly a seemingly normal man can transform into a monster. The horror wasn't just the murders themselves, it was the premeditation. Chris chose this path. He had opportunities to confess the affair, to leave, to divorce. But instead, he opted for annihilation. The trial was over. The guilty plea was entered. Chris Watts was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Yet the story of the Watts family didn't end there. Across Colorado, the United States, and the world, the aftermath of their murders left shockwaves, a haunting reminder of betrayal, loss, and the fragility of the family unit. News of the Watts murders became a global sensation. Social media exploded with disbelief and outrage. Hashtags like hashtag Justice for Shanann, hashtag Bella and Celeste, and hashtag Chris Watts trended worldwide. True crime forums dissected every photo, text message, and interview. Documentaries, podcasts, and news specials followed, including Netflix's American Murder, The Family Next Door, which used Shanann's real-life social media footage to tell the story. For many viewers, the most shocking aspect wasn't just the murders. It was Chris's ability to lie convincingly on camera while hiding his crimes. Shanann's parents, Frank and Sandra Rozisek, became public advocates for victims' rights. They spoke openly about the pain of losing their daughter and grandchildren. They emphasized the importance of recognizing warning signs of abusive or controlling behavior in relationships. Through interviews and speaking engagements, they honored Shanann's memory and kept Bella, Celeste, and Nico in the public consciousness. Shanann was full of life, love, and joy, Sandra said. We want her story to help others and to remind the world of the innocence that was stolen. Chris Watts' affair with Nickel Kessinger became a focal point of media attention. Many questioned her role, wondering if she could have prevented the tragedy. Nickel eventually cut all ties with Chris and moved away from the public eye. She has maintained a low profile, and while she is not legally responsible, public curiosity about her connection to Chris has never faded. Criminologists continue to study Chris Watts as a classic family annihilator. Key takeaways from the case include: premeditation can exist even in seemingly normal suburban men. Social media and digital footprints often reveal the hidden lives of perpetrators. Public fascination with the case stems from the juxtaposition of domestic normalcy and unthinkable horror. True crime enthusiasts continue to analyze Chris's demeanor, the red flags Shanann missed, and the lessons the world can learn. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico are remembered not just for how they died, but for the lives they lived. Shanann's social media videos show her vibrant personality and devotion to her children. Bella and Celeste's laughter, playfulness, and innocence remain frozen in images and video clips. The story continues to remind parents, communities, and viewers of the hidden dangers that can lurk behind closed doors. Vigils, memorials, and online tributes ensure that they are not forgotten. The Watts family murders shocked the world, not only for the brutality of the crime, but for the chilling reality that evil can hide behind a familiar face. Chris was maybe locked away, but the story of Shanann, Bella, Celeste, and Nico lives on as a cautionary tale, a warning, and a tribute to lives cut tragically short. In remembering them, we honor the innocence that was stolen, and we remind ourselves that even the most ordinary facades can conceal the darkest secrets. Kindly subscribe, like, and comment for more.